Buongiorno a tutti, mi chiamo Charlotte. Come state? Bene? Sì? Spero di sì. So today we'll be looking at how you change questions in Italian from the to form to the lei form. So that means asking in the you form, but changing from the singular informal that you use with people that you know, people the same kind of age, with family members, neighbours that you're really familiar with, that kind of thing, to the lei form, which is formal. That's a form that you might use with a teacher or someone who's a senior to you in a position of work, or someone who's senior in age and you want to show them respect, with a doctor, a professional like a lawyer, anyone really that you want to treat with respect. So specifically we'll be changing questions from the to form to the lei form. This works in the same kind of way as changing statements from the to form to the lei form. Look for the verb. The main thing you need to change in the sentence is the verb. You might need to change a few other elements like the subject pronoun, or maybe little direct object pronouns, indirect object pronouns, that kind of thing. But the main thing you need to look for is the verb. So I thought we'd start off with a question you may be familiar with. Hopefully you're familiar with this. Come stai? Come stai? So if I'm talking to a friend of mine or a colleague or my husband or my family member, I might ask them how they are. Come stai? Come stai? Come, that's the question word, which means how, and stai is the verb stare, which means to be. It's one of the verbs which means to be, but it's the one that we use when we're asking someone how they're feeling, how they are in themselves, if you like. So here in this question, stai is the to form in the present tense of the verb stare. So it's the first person, is the second person, sorry. Io is the first person, tu is the second person, singular. Okay, io, tu, lui, lei, all the singulars. Noi, voi, and loro, all the plurals. First, second, third, singular, first, second, third, plural. So we're looking at the second person, you, in the singular, but also in the formal. So we change stai. Anyone know what that changes to? If you're asking someone how they are and you don't know them, it becomes come sta. Come sta. So, you probably noticed, come stays the same. That's the interrogative, that's the question, how, but the verb stare changes from stai to sta. Come sta? So what's happening here? Okay, so basically, if you look at a conjugation of the verb stare, you will find sto bene, I'm well. Non sto bene, I'm not well. Sto is the first person singular, I am, when used with things like well, I'm not well, things aren't going great, that kind of thing. Stai is the to form. Sta is the he and she form. Lui sta bene, he is well. Lei sta bene, she is well. But in Italian, the formal is the formal conjugation of you is actually the same as the he and she form. Bit weird, eh? Not quite like the French, where it's just plural. The vous form can be plural or singular, depending on whether it's formal or not. More or less, it's not quite like that. Formal you doesn't really exist in English. You just use the word you, whether you're talking to someone that you're deriding, or whether you're talking to someone that you adore, or someone who's in a position of authority. It's just you. In Italian, you use the conjugation of any verb in the third person. So it's as if you're saying he or she. Lei. Okay? Lei actually means she or her. Okay? So it's as if you're saying something along the lines of, I hope Sir likes his breakfast this morning. You know, you're using the third person. I hope that you like your breakfast this morning. You know? So there is a slight equivalent in English, but it's a bit archaic. Anyway, so come stai goes to come sta. Now that change there just requires you to flip through the conjugation tables in your mind and go to the third person he or she form. And that's what we're going to do with the rest of the questions that I've got today. So let's have a look. Ce ne sono 20. There's 20 of them. That's quite a lot. And you might notice that I'm in a different room today. I've changed my office around. And now I have a nice big unit with all my books. I haven't quite unpacked. I've got a lovely green walls, and this is going to be my studio, my office for the next, at least for the next year or so. Okay, so let's have a look at this first question. Okay, that you might notice that these first two are actually very similar. I shall just zoom in a wee bit so you can see. They're very similar, but the preposition at the beginning changes because of the verb which is used with it. Let me just move that out of the way. Okay. I'll say all the questions so that you can hear how they are, maybe think about what they mean. See if you can change the verb from the to form to the lei, third person form, and then, if you can, and it's correct, you'll have the same question in the formal, okay? So let's have a look. Di dove sei? Di dove sei? Okay, di dove sei. That means, di dove sei, where are you from? So we've got where, from where, okay, the preposition often comes before the verb, before the question word, di dove sei. This bit here is the verb in the to form, it's from essere, okay? So, from where are you? We change that into the third person, so io sono, tu sei, that's what we've got there, lui, lei, è. So you could have è instead of that, di dove è. That's sort of truncated or contracted down to dove, like that. Dove. Oh, let's go up a little bit so you see it. That could be contracted down to dove with a little apostrophe. Let's see if I can zoom in there. Or you can slightly change the question around if you want to be a bit clearer. So, of where are you, or of where is she, if you like. So this is the third person singular of essere. But you can also kind of make it clearer who you're addressing at the beginning by putting the subject pronoun lei, which is basically you in the third person formal. Lei è di dove? You are from where? Okay, you might hear that as well. We're not going to rearrange all of these sentences by putting the subject pronoun at the beginning, but it can happen. If it's easier for you and you want to clarify who you're addressing or the fact that you're addressing someone formally, you can put lei at the beginning, follow it by the verb in the third person singular to agree with lei. It's as if you're saying he or she is. And then put whatever the rest of the question is, okay? But just to simplify and to check that you can understand what the questions mean here, rack your brains about what the third person singular version is, then that's what we're really aiming to do, okay? Da dove vieni? Da dove vieni? How is that different from the one above? It's kind of the same meaning. Di dove sei? Where are you from? Are you, being from the verb to be, essere, here is where do you come from? So it's the verb to come, venire, in the second person singular. Tu vieni da blah 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 blah, Italia, Francia, blah blah blah. So we've got a slightly different preposition, from, as opposed to of. But in English we would just say from. Where are you from? Where do you come from? Slightly different in Italian. Da dove vieni? That changes to the third person. Viene. Viene. Quite irregular, that. So in Italian, in the present tense, let me clarify. In the present tense, ERE verbs in the third person singular end with an E. ARE verbs will end with an A in the he or she form. Mangia, cammina, canta, etc. but here we've got an example of an ERE verb, finishing with an E. Finisce, capisce. I can't think of any examples now, but they tend to end with an E in the third person he, she form. So da dove viene, with an E, is how you would ask, where do you come from, in the lei form. You could say, for example, da dove viene lei, or you could say, lei da dove viene. So you could put the lei at the beginning or the end to show that the person you're addressing them in the formal form, okay? To clarify who you're asking about. Dove abiti? So we've got 3 where questions. Where are you from? Where do you come from? Where do you... something. So, abitare is the verb. Just realised that. You might have not seen my whole face during that because it was like zoomed in. Non importa, it's not a problem. So, abiti is the to form. You'll notice that most of the verbs in the to form, present tense, to form, lots of tenses, but the present tense here, in the to form they'll end with an I. We've got fai, say, I, say, sai, etc. That's a little clue that they're in the to form, informal singular. So we're going to change this verb abitare, which means to live or inhabit, to the third person form. Okay? So if it's an ARE verb, there's the to form. Abit is the stem of the verb, a little like the first part. The ending there is in the to form. We're going to change it to the lui lei form, okay? Abita. Okay, like I just said, ARE verbs in the third person, he or she, end with an A, okay? Dove abita? Lei dove abita? Where do you live then? In the formal, okay? So, che lavoro fai? What do you do for work? What job do you do, if you like? What work do you do? Che lavoro fai? Fai, from the verb fare, changes to fa. Che lavoro fa? Lei che lavoro fa? Okay, this is quite personal, but you might be asking these questions, I don't know, you just might be. Okay, don't worry too much about the content of the questions. It's more the fact that we're changing verbs that I think you might recognise from the to form to the lei form. Okay, so don't get hung up too much on the actual content. Oh, you wouldn't ask someone that if you're asking someone formally you've never met before, or you're asking with respect. Don't worry too much. It's just the exercise, okay? Che fai nella vita? What do you do in life? So that might seem a little bit strange, but that's actually quite a common structure. Now, what is it you do? What do you do then? Okay. So if you're asking someone politely in the lei form, fai, again, it's the same verb here, fare, to do or to make, changes from the to form to the third person singular, fa. Che fa nella vita? So every time I'm underlining the verb and I'm writing the lei equivalent there, just substitute this part here with that and you have a lei form, okay? Now we've seen this one before. Di dove sei? Where are you from? Sei sposato. Okay, so what we have here is a little verb first, and then we have an adjective. So this is equivalent to are you married? Okay, so sposato or sposata, depending on whether you're talking to a man, sposato, or a woman, sposata, are you married? So that looks a little bit like the word spouse, okay? Sposo, sposa means spouse in Italian, okay? And this ato ending, or ata, whenever you have an adjective used with the verb essere, are you married, are you young, are you old, are you rich, are you poor, are you thin, are you fat, are you tall, are you short, that kind of thing, the adjective will either have an O or an A at the end, O for a male, A for a female, Or it might be a little bit different and end with an E, like interessante, which can be used for a man or a woman. With an E at the end, the adjective stays the same. It doesn't change. But other adjectives like this, married, agree with the gender of the person you're speaking to. So we've got the verb, well, we've got the conjugation say. So instead of using to say, we use lei è. So, similar to the one up above, where we have the same verb conjugation è, we could say lei è sposato, or we could say lei è sposata, if you're addressing a lady, you're married. Or we could say è sposato lei. If it's easier, just put lei at the beginning, like the subject pronoun. Are you married? Okay, quanti anni hai? Quanti anni hai? So here we have another question word. Quanti anni hai? So you might have heard of quanto. Quanto vuol dire how much or how many. So in Italian, when you're asking someone their age, how old are you? You don't use the question word come, as you might think, right? Because that means how. You don't use come, you use quanto in the plural. Okay, so quanti anni, how many years do you have? So here we have the two form. Hai. From which verb? Which verb is hai from? I'll go through the conjugation, see if you remember. Ho, hai, ha, abbiamo, avete, hanno. They're my little they're my little gestures to show you who I'm talking about. Io ho 36 anni. I'm 36. I have 36 years. Tu hai. Lui, lei ha. Okay, you don't pronounce that H there. It's not ha. It's a. So, ho, hai, ha. Third person singular. Abbiamo, noi, we have. Voi avete, you guys have. Loro hanno, they have. So it's the verb avere, one of the auxiliary verbs. You need to know that verb, and it's all its conjugations in the present tense, as well as essere. Okay, they're really useful for asking questions. Do you have you got? Or how many years do you have? How old are you, basically? Quanti anni ha? Or lei ha quanti anni? Ha quanti anni lei? For example, all different ways of asking the same thing. Okay, so we've seen, let me just make a list of the verbs that we've seen. Let me see if I can find a free whiteboard, free mini whiteboard. That one's got stuff written on it. Typical. Right, okay. So here we have say from. I have Italian accent when I speak English. Okay, essere. Venire. Maybe I'll write these in a list and put it under the video so you know exactly which verbs I've looked at. Then you can go and find the conjugations of those verbs in whichever tense you like. Most of these are in the present tense, but we'll also look at some conjugations in the conditional. Okay? So, sei from essere goes to è. Vieni from venire goes to viene. Abitare is to live. This is to be, this is to come, this is to live. Abiti goes to abita. Fai is from the verb fare, which goes to fa. Fai again goes to fa. Sei is from essere, that goes to è. I is from, it's really hard not to have an Italian accent when I speak English. That was a bit Russian actually, don't know what's going on today. Essere, venire, abitare, fare, avere. Okay, let's have a look. The next one is essere again. So you should, anything that should be sei in the to form goes to è. Sei britannico, sei britannica. I mean, you probably wouldn't say that, but it's just an example. You could change it to tedesco, tedesca. tedesco, tedesca. Again, these nationalities are essentially adjectives. They describe someone. German. Lei è tedesco. Lei è tedesca. So here the verb sei goes to è. What's going on today? Everything's falling off the desk. Doesn't make any sense. Non ha senso, non so cosa succede. Okay, so this one also is in the sei form, so it's from the verb essere. Sei studente. Okay, so the thing about this is that there is a masculine version of the word student, and then there's a feminine version of the word student, okay? So depending on the gender of the person you're addressing, you change the word accordingly. I know that that's a very topical issue at the moment, so we'll just stay away from that, but that's basically what happens with Italian, okay? So, sei becomes è. Lei è studentessa. Are you a student? That's a female version. Lei è studente. You are a student. Studente, studentessa. Incidentally, studente is one of those words which ends with an E. It can be an adjective. It's basically, no, scusa, it's a noun. It's a noun. So we've seen, or I mentioned, some adjectives normally end with an O or an A in the singular. And with the verb essere, you have to agree the adjective according to the gender of whoever you're addressing or talking about. However, I also said there are some words like interessante, which end with an E. Speciale, felice, triste, all of them, I'm thinking of them all now. Happy, sad, interesting, special, for example. They're adjectives that end with an E. So you can use them for either a boy or a girl, basically. But you also get nouns that end with an E, but often there's an Italian, obviously in Italian, there's a feminine equivalent, right? So studente would be for a boy. Studentessa would be for a female student, okay? If you don't know that essa is the suffix that you add to studente when you're talking to someone, are you a student? You, female person. If you don't know that essa needs to go on the end of studente, don't worry too much, but it does exist, and you kind of do need to know it if you want to be understood and be thought of as having a good level of Italian, okay? So, that's for nouns that end in E. Sometimes there's a feminine equivalent, okay? Okay, let's go on to number 10. Let's go down a little bit. Okay, so this looks very similar to that, but it's a different verb, so have a listen to the question. Sai che ore sono? Sai. Sai. So not se, but sai. This is a different verb. This is the verb sapere, which means to know. It's actually one of two verbs, which translates into English as the verb to know, but it's one that can be used with direct. It can be followed by a question word. So, sai che ore sono? Do you know what time it is? Changes to the third person. Sa. Lei sa che ore sono? Excuse me, miss, or excuse me, sir, do you know what time it is? Please, would be nice. Lei sa che ore sono? Per favore. I think you can hopefully see where I'm getting with this. Lots of questions, you just change the verb, generally just the verb, from the to the lei form. So you need to know what the verb is. You obviously need to know what question you're asking and how you form it. Hopefully some of these will give you a clue, help you to see, oh, that's how you ask. Do you know where to find something? That's how you ask. Where are you from? Where do you come from? Etc. So, let's look for the verb. Vuoi. Another irregular verb, the verb volere. It's also a modal verb, very useful. And in this particular instance, the verb, I haven't got a question mark there, the verb is followed by an infinitive verb. So that's something that happens with modal verbs. Volere, dovere, potere, also sapere works in the same way. We just saw sapere. You can follow it directly, you can conjugate it in the to or the lei or the noi or the voi form, and follow it with an infinitive verb, and this is what happens. Do you want to dance? Vuoi ballare? Vuoi ballare con me? Do you want to dance with me? We're going to change it now into the lei form. So instead of vuoi, which is the to form, it becomes vuole. Lei vuole ballare? Sì, certo, balliamo. Yes, of course, let's dance. So, volere is the verb. That's the to form in the present tense, and this is the third person form, which is essentially the formal way of saying you. It could also be he or she wants to dance. So if you put someone else's name in there, vuole ballare Marco? Marco vuole ballare? Does Marco want to dance? Do you think Marco wants to dance? It can be used with someone else's name. The context will make it clear. But if you're asking someone directly, you can use tu vuoi ballare? Do you want to dance in the singular? Or lei vuole ballare in the formal. Okay? It's kind of romantic in the formal. Okay, here we have another irregular verb. And it's not written on my little list. It's the verb andare. So that means to go. So we've got the to form of the verb to go in the present tense. Vai spesso a Roma. Vai spesso a Roma. What does that mean? So that's the to form, remember. Do you go? So in Italian, not in English, you say do you want, do you have, do you like, do you know. You use this do word, okay? And that's like a question marker. That tells the person you're speaking to, oh, this is probably a question. In Italian, you don't need that. You don't translate the word do. Do you want, do you like? You just say you like, you want, you have, you know. That's the verb. And in Italian, you can conjugate the verb in the to form, and then that tells the person you're speaking to that you're speaking to them in the singular. Or if you use the lei form, it tells them you're speaking to them in the formal lei form, which also means you. If there's any confusion, just use the subject pronoun tu. So in that question there, you can say vuoi ballare, and if you pronounce it right and you conjugate the verb right, correctly, they'll understand it means do you want. Or vuole, do you want? I'm addressing you formally with respect. But you can also use tu. Tu vuoi ballare? Vuoi ballare tu? Do you want to dance? Okay, you can clarify using the subject pronouns. Subject pronouns are io, tu, lui, lei, lei, noi, voi, and loro. There's loads of stuff going on in this lesson. I'll try and make some notes of it underneath, but the main thing is asking questions, changing the verb from the to informal form of the singular to the lei, third person singular. Vai becomes va. Lei va spesso a Roma. That means, do you often go to Rome? Remember, when you're speaking about cities or places, towns and cities mainly, you use the preposition a. Okay? Just a plus the name of the city. Remember, there are sometimes equivalents in Italian for city names, like Paris becomes Parigi, Rome, obviously, Roma, London, Londra, etc. But smaller cities and towns, you don't have to translate them. Sometimes they don't have like an Italianized version. Okay, just for example, io abito a Chepstow. I live in Chepstow. It's a town name. I don't translate it. I don't think an equivalent translation that's Italianized exists. You just put the preposition a before it. Okay, so we've seen essere, venire, abitare, fare, avere, sapere, volere, andare. All these verbs are the infinitive forms. To be, to come, to live, to inhabit, to do or to make, to have or to have got, to know, one of the versions, to want and to go. Now we're back to sei stato a. Ooh, this is in the passato prossimo. This is the past tense. So in English this would be, have you been to Paris? Have you been to? So, sei stato or stata a Parigi. When you're using the verb essere or even the verb stare, they're conjugated in the same way in the past tense. You have to agree the past participle now with the gender of the person to whom you're talking. Okay, you also have to agree a number, but here we're talking to you singular, lei, or tu. Now we're changing it to lei. So we're changing that to è. Lei è stata a Parigi. I don't think I have any other past tense, passato prossimo questions here, which is just as well because that's quite a complex thing to get your head around. But that's a good one. Have you been to a place? Sei stato, sei stata, if it's a lady, in the formal lei form, lei è stato or lei è stata. Okay, now we're looking at preferire. Okay, so preferire, to prefer. Yeah, to prefer. Which would you rather? To rather or to prefer? Okay, so this is in the present tense, in the to form, remember. All these questions are in the to form. Preferisci, this verb, is another verb that functions like sapere or volere or potere or what's the other one? Dovere. They can be followed by an infinitive, as is the case here. Preferisci andare? Do you prefer to go to? Again, you don't need to translate do in English. Preferisci, you prefer, at the beginning of a sentence with your intonation up at the end. It's a question, okay? Preferisci andare a teatro o al cinema? Do you prefer to go to the theatre or to the cinema? So we're going to change this to the third person. Now, preferire is an IRE verb. And I think I mentioned before, like venire, the third person singular he, she, lei, lui, lei form ends with an E for IRE verbs. So, preferisce. When you hear in films, the mafioso type films, you hear capisce, capisce, capisce. So it's a similar conjugation. It's got this ish, isce, ishi ending at the end. Lei preferisce andare. Do you prefer to do something, something? You can change the ending. Preferisce il vino bianco o il vino rosso, for example. Okay, now we get a little bit more complicated here. We have a modal verb, puoi, which means you can, in the to form. But we've got this object pronoun in front of it. Mi puoi aiutare. Now what do you think that means? Mi puoi aiutare. Potere, to be able to, or can, if you like. Can you help me? Mi puoi aiutare, per favore? That's a useful one, isn't it? So, we're changing puoi, which means you can, or can you, to the third person, lei form. Può. Mi può aiutare. Can you, lei, help me? When you have the verb potere, or volere, or sapere, or dovere, or what was the other one? Preferire, you can sometimes follow it by an infinitive verb. Can you help me? Puoi aiutar mi. You can also write this verb in a slightly different way. Puoi aiutarmi, and you can put me at the end of aiutare. But here, I've done it slightly differently. Mi puoi aiutare. Changes to mi può aiutare. The only thing that changes in this question, going from the to the lei form, is the conjugation of the verb. The only conjugation in that phrase, that sentence, that question. This is an infinitive verb, like potere, like all of these, they're written in their unchanged, long, full forms. That's an infinitive verb. And it translates into English as like to something, to do, to go, to want, to look, to be, to come, to live, to do, to make, to have, to know, to want, to go, to prefer, to be able. Okay? So, now we're going up a notch again, because here, this is in the to form, but it's not the present tense anymore, it's the conditional. So this goes from can you to could you, or do you want to would you like. Do you prefer to would you prefer, okay? So think of could, would, should, or think of would you like, would you want, would you have, would you be so kind, that kind of thing. Coulda, woulda, shoulda translates into Italian as the conditional, present conditional, okay? So here we have potresti, oh no, scusa, we don't have potresti, that's that one. We have preferiresti, would you prefer, as opposed to do you prefer. Preferiresti mangiare dentro o fuori? So, would you prefer to eat? Again, we have to prefer, conjugated in a tense, followed by an infinitive. Would you prefer to eat inside or outside? Dentro o fuori? Dentro o fuori, okay? So what we're doing here is we're changing that ending, esti, which goes at the end of an infinitive verb, take off the e at the end and pop it on the end of the stem, minus the e, and then you have the to form of the conditional. Preferiresti changes to preferireste, similar but not the same. Preferireste. Now, like when I prepare for these, like this tutorial, I have to check the spelling, I have to check I've got all the syllables in there. Preferireste, okay? But, you know, sometimes you have to do that just to make sure, especially if you're teaching someone. But, you know, it can be quite hard as a non-native to sometimes think, okay, but it's worth checking. Preferireste, the ending just has an E there, basically, instead of an I. Now, similar thing. Potresti dirmi dove si trova? It's quite a complex little sentence, isn't it? Could you tell me? Okay. Potresti dirmi. So, here we had mi puoi aiutare, but you could say, for example, mi potresti dire. Could you tell me? Don't worry too much about it. It's just if ever you're gonna ask someone, can you tell me where something is? Make a note of this. It's very polite. Actually, make a note of the lei form that I'm about to change it into. So potresti changes to scusa. I've just realised something. I wonder if you've realised this. What I've done here is actually incorrect. I've changed this from the to form into the voi form. I'm glad I spotted that. So this is incorrect. That's the voi form. What we need is the lei form. So we've got the verb preferiresti. Remember, we're not going from the to singular to the to plural. We're going from second person singular to the third person singular. So let's keep the verb preferire and put it in the third person lei form. So preferirebbe. Sorry guys, I actually did write down the voi form on here, but I completely forgot that I was going from to lei rather than to voi. It happens sometimes. So preferireste becomes preferirebbe. Okay, we're going to see that ebbe ending again, and we're going to see it just here. So instead of potresti, which is can you to, we're going to take the ending off and we're going to add ebbe. Potrebbe. Okay, that means he, she, or it, or you, formal, could you tell me, dirmi, from the verb dire, dove si trova, where one can find That's a useful little, you could just use that on its own actually. Dove si trova la stazione centrale? Where's the central station? Etc. Here I've got Piazza San Marco, if you're in Venice. Potrebbe dirmi. I'm so glad I noticed that there. Even with like prep, sometimes you can lose your train of thought or your trail of thought just before recording. So, preferirebbe as opposed to preferiresti. Potrebbe instead of potresti. Now we're getting down a little bit further, almost at the bottom now. We've got 3 more left. It's quite a long video, so well done if you're sticking with me. Vorresti is the conditional, present conditional of the verb volere. So vorresti means do you want, or would you like, We're going to change it. It's going to have this ebbe ending. Take that off. What does that make? Vorrebbe. Vorrebbe accompagnarmi. That's nice. That means would you like to come with me? Would you like to accompany me? And again we've got me. Vorrebbe, would you like, in the lei form. Lei vorrebbe. Accompagnare is the verb, the infinitive verb, which follows the verb volere when it's conjugated. But to accompany me, you put the direct object pronoun me at the end of the verb. Alternatively, you might hear or be able to say mi vorrebbe accompagnare. But that's a whole nother video. Okay, look out for me either at the beginning or the end of a sentence with a modal verb in. Okay. Ti piace la musica? This is more difficult. The verb piacere, I think that's the last one on here now. Piacere means to please or be pleasing to. This is used with indirect object pronouns like mi piace. So we've just seen that mi at the end. It's a slightly different pronoun actually, a slightly different function grammatically, but it looks the same. Okay, mi piace la musica, mi piace questo video, sì. Mi piace ballare, mi piace mia mamma, okay, mi piace il caffè, etc. You can like a lot of things. When it's a singular thing like coffee, my mum, dancing, singing, etc. Music. When it's a singular noun, you use mi piace. In the to form, here you're saying I like music, for example, la musica. If you're saying you like in the to form, you can ask the question ti piace? Ti piace la musica? Sì, mi piace la musica. So the thing that changes is not the verb piacere, because that agrees with music. Music, it is pleasing to me. So mi piace means it is pleasing to me. That's the me bit. Ti piace means it is pleasing to you, a te. Now this is where it's complicated. In the lei form, the formal form, the only bit that you change in these sentences is the indirect object pronoun. So it's le piace la musica. La musica piace a lei. So if you're not quite sure what I'm talking about, you need to look for indirect object pronouns in Italian or the verb piacere, to please, to like, to be pleasing to. Okay, it works in a different way to the English verb to like. Le piace la musica? Sì, mi piace molto. Per esempio, le piacciono I cani? Do you like dogs? Sì, mi piacciono I cani. So you've got piacciono and piace. The reason they're different is because dogs is plural. They please me, if you like. Music, it pleases me. Whew, at the end it got quite hard there, and I was really confused when I got like voi conjugations instead of lei, but I'm glad sometimes that I make these little errors, because I can point them out to you. It shows you that even professional linguists can make errors, especially when you're recording a 45-minute video in one take. But also, you know, it is confusing. In English, there's only one way to say you. In Italian, you've got the tu form, you've got the lei form, you've got the voi form, and it depends whether you're talking to more than one person, that's voi, whether you're talking to someone formally, that's the lei form, or whether you're talking to someone that you know informally, or someone younger than you, that's the tu form. So, you know, sometimes it's good to make mistakes, because you're going to make lots of mistakes when you're using your language in real life. Okay, so don't feel bad about mistakes. We need them and we learn from them. So, in order to go from a tu form, singular you, question or a statement, the main thing you need to do is change the verb in order to get the lei form. Okay, sei becomes è, vieni becomes viene, abita, abiti becomes abita, fai becomes fa, fai becomes fa, sei becomes è, I becomes a. It's like a little song, isn't it? Sei becomes e, sei becomes e, sai becomes sa, vuoi becomes vuole, vai becomes va, sei becomes e, preferisci with an I becomes preferisce, puoi becomes può. Now these ones here, remember, are the conditional present, not the present tense, the conditional. So could you, or no, would you prefer, would you prefer, could you tell me, would you like. Preferiresti becomes preferirebbe, vorresti becomes vorrebbe, what was that one? Potresti becomes potrebbe, and then here we've got back to the present tense, but we're using the verb piacere. So the bit that changes is not ti piace, it's le piace. Qualcosa piace a lei. And it might be piace or piacciono, depending on whether you're talking about something singular that is liked. Music or dogs or animals or, you know, the weather, whatever. Grazie mille. I'll send anyone who's a member of my Italian club the handout which has all these questions. If you like, you can watch the video, go through it again, and you know, see whether you remember what the conjugations are in the lei form. Send them to me if you like, if you're a member of my club, and I'll give you feedback on them. There's also some exercises at the bottom, and I'll put a link or maybe two into to some online exercises or some further information. I wish you a great day. Grazie mille, buona giornata e alla prossima volta. Ciao!